Today we are reading the HTML elements reference. This is my first video on this channel, and I thought we would start with the most basic thing possible, and that's HTML elements. We're reading from the MDN docs page. If you want to check it out yourself, you'll find the link in the description. Let's get going. All right, the goal today is to make some audio flashcards for HTML elements. So we'll start with HTML. Represents the root top-level element of an HTML document, so it is also referred to as the root element. All other elements must be descendants of this element. Metadata contains information about the page. This includes information about styles, scripts, and data to help software, search engines and browsers, and etc., use and render the page. Metadata for styles and scripts may be defined in the page or linked to another file that has the information. I really didn't think that HTML elements were going to be very useful, and then I found out about what SEO was, and I decided it was probably worth, at least learning the important ones, unless you want your website to just be a trillion nested divs, which is apparently not good for SEO. You need at least a couple things. Base specifies the base URL to use for all relative URLs in a document. There can only be one such element in a document. Head contains machine-readable information, metadata, about the document, like its title, scripts, and style sheets. Link specifies relationships between the current document and an external resource. This element is most commonly used to link to CSS, but is also used to establish site icons, both favicon style icons and icons for the home screen and apps on mobile devices, among other things. Meta represents metadata that cannot be represented by other HTML meta-related elements, like base, link, script, style, and title. Style contains style information for a document or part of a document. It contains CSS, which is applied to the contents of the document containing this element. Title defines the document's title that is shown in a browser's title bar or a page's tab. It only contains text. Tags within the element are ignored. Body represents the content of an HTML document. There can only be one such element in a document. The content sectioning is where it gets kind of important for the SEO, even though you're not going to use most of these, in my opinion. I think it's still useful, and I think it's maybe a little bit more interesting than just using divs everywhere. So, address indicates that the enclosed HTML provides contact information for a person or people or for an organization. A lot of these kind of are self-explanatory, which is nice. Which HTML is really easy. It's like the kind of thing you can learn in a couple weeks. Article represents a self-contained composition in a document, page, application, or site, which is intended to be independently distributable or reusable, e.g., in syndication. Examples include a forum post, a magazine or newspaper article, a blog entry, a product card, a user-submitted comment, an interactive widget or gadget, or any other independent item of content. Aside represents a portion of a document whose content is only indirectly related to the document's main content. Asides are frequently presented as sidebars or call-out boxes. Footer represents a footer for its nearest ancestor, sectioning content or sectioning root element. A footer typically contains information about the author of the section, copyright data, or links to related documents. Header represents introductory content, typically a group of introductory or navigational aids. It may contain some heading elements, but also a logo, a search form, an author name, and other elements. H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6 represents 6 levels of section headings. H1 is the highest section level, and H6 is the lowest. H group represents a heading grouped with any secondary content such as subheadings, an alternative title, or a tagline. Main represents the dominant content of the body of a document. The main content area consists of content that is directly related to or expands upon the central topic of a document, or the central functionality of an application. Nav represents a section of a page whose purpose is to provide navigational links, either within the current document or to other documents. Common examples of navigation sections are menus, tables of contents, and indexes. Section represents a generic, standalone section of a document, which doesn't have a more specific semantic element to represent it. Section should always have a heading, with very few exceptions. Search represents a part that contains a set of form controls or other content related to performing a search or filtering operation. Text content. Use HTML text content elements to organize blocks or sections of content placed between the opening body and closing body tags. Important for accessibility and SEO, these elements identify the purpose or structure of that content. Block quote indicates that the enclosed text is an extended quotation. Usually this is rendered visually by indentation. A URL for the source of the quotation may be given using the cite attribute, while a text representation of the source can be given using the cite element. DD provides the description, definition, or value for the preceding term, DT, in a description list, DL. Div. The div. The division. Can you center one of these? I've heard that's a really important thing to be able to do if you want to work in front end. You need to be able to take one of these things and put it right in the middle of your page. I don't know. I'm just what I've heard. Div, the generic container for flow content. It has no effect on the content or layout until styled in some way using CSS, e.g., styling is directly applied to it, or some kind of layout model like Flexbox is applied to its parent element. DL represents a description list. The element encloses a list of groups of terms, specified using the DT element, and descriptions, provided by DD elements. Common uses for this element are to implement a glossary or to display metadata, a list of key value pairs. DT specifies a term in a description or definition list, and as such must be used inside a DL element. It is usually followed by a DD element. However, multiple DT elements in a row indicate several terms that are all defined by the immediate next DD element. Fig caption represents a caption or legend describing the rest of the content of its parent figure element. Figure represents self-contained content, potentially with an optional caption, which is specified using the fig caption element. The figure, its caption, and its contents are referenced as a single unit. HR represents the thematic break between paragraph-level elements, for example, a change of scene in a story, or a shift of topic within a section. LI, list item, represents an item in a list. It must be contained in a parent element, an ordered list, OL, an unordered list, UL, or a menu. In menus and unordered lists, list items are usually displayed using bullet points. In ordered lists, they are usually displayed with an ascending counter on the left, such as a number or letter. Menu, a semantic alternative to UL, but treated by browsers and exposed through the accessibility tree as no different than UL. It represents an unordered list of items which are represented by LI elements. OL represents an ordered list of items, typically rendered as a numbered list. P represents a paragraph. Paragraphs are usually represented in visual media as blocks of text separated from adjacent blocks by blank lines and/or first-line indentation, but HTML paragraphs can be any structural grouping of related content, such as images or form fields. Pre represents preformed text which is to be presented exactly as written in the HTML file. The text is typically rendered using a non-proportional or monospaced font. Whitespace inside this element is displayed as written. UL represents an unordered list of items, typically rendered as a bulleted list. Inline text semantics. Use the HTML inline text semantic to define the meaning, structure, or style of a word, line, or any arbitrary piece of text. A. Anchor. Together with its href attribute, creates a hyperlink to web pages, files, email addresses, locations within the current page, or anything else a URL can address. ABBR, abbreviation, represents an abbreviation or acronym. Nice. B. Used to draw the reader's attention to the element's contents, which are not otherwise granted special importance. This was formerly known as the boldface element, and most browsers still draw the text in boldface. However, you should not use B for styling text or granting importance. If you wish to create boldface text, you should use the CSS font weight property. If you wish to indicate an element is of special importance, you should use the strong element. This description is mostly referring to like screen readers, and that's why these things are important. BDI tells the browser's bidirectional algorithm to treat the text it contains in isolation from its surrounding text. It's particularly useful when a website dynamically inserts some text and doesn't know the directionality of the text being inserted. BDO overrides the current directionality of text so that the text within is rendered in a different direction. I've never used that one. BR produces a line break in text, carriage return. It is useful for writing a poem or an address where the division of lines is significant. I'm assuming you shouldn't use this as like a way to add margin or space between elements, just like generally in your page, which is kind of how I've used it a little bit in a project I've been working on recently. I will look into that. Cite. Used to mark up the title of a cited creative work. The reference may be in an abbreviated form according to context-appropriate conventions related to citation metadata. Code. Displays its contents styled in a fashion intended to indicate that the text is a short-form fragment of computer code. By default, the content text is displayed using the user's agent default monospace font. Data. Links a given piece of content with a machine-readable translation. If the content is time or date related, the time element must be used. DFN. Used to indicate the term being defined within the context of a definition, phrase, or sentence. The ancestor P element, the DT/DD pairing, or the nearest section ancestor of the DFN element is considered to be the definition of the term. DFN stands for definition. EM. Marks text that has stress emphasis. The EM element can be nested, with each nesting level indicating a greater degree of emphasis. I. Represents a range of text that is set off from the normal text for some reason, such as idiomatic text, technical terms, and taxonomical designations, among others. Historically, these have been presented using italicized type, which is the original source of the I naming of this element. I've also seen that it's a convention with the I element to use, like if you are using icon, like React icons, to wrap them in an I element. KBD, King Black Dragon. Probably doesn't stand for that. I'm not sure, we're going to find out. Represents a span of inline text denoting textual user input from a keyboard, voice input, or any other text entry device. By convention, the user agent defaults to rendering the contents of a KBD element using its default monospace font, although this is not mandated by the HTML standard. Alright, hell yeah. Does it stand for keyboard? Mark. Represents text which is marked or highlighted for reference or notation purposes due to the marked passage's relevance in the enclosing context. Q. Indicates that the enclosed text is a short inline quotation. Most modern browsers implement this by surrounding the text in quotation marks. This element is intended for short quotations that don't require paragraph breaks. For long quotations, use the block quote element. RP. used to provide fallback parentheses for browsers that do not support the display of Ruby annotations using the Ruby element. One RP element should enclose each of the opening and closing parentheses that wrap the RT element that contains the annotation's text. RT specifies the Ruby text component of a Ruby annotation, which is used to provide pronunciation, translation, or transliteration information for East Asian typography. The RT element must always be contained within a Ruby element. Well, what's the Ruby element? Guess what? We got it right here. Ruby represents small annotations that are rendered above, below, or next to base text, usually used for showing the pronunciation of East Asian characters. It can also be used for annotating other kinds of text, but this usage is less common. S renders text with a strike-through, or a line through it. Use the S element to represent things that are no longer relevant or no longer accurate. However, S is not appropriate when indicating document edits. For that, use the delete or insert elements as appropriate. Del and ins. Samp used to enclose inline text which represents sample or quoted output from a computer program. Its contents are typically rendered using the browser's default monospaced font, such as Courier or Lucida Console. Small represents side comments and small print, like copyright and legal text, independent of its styled presentation. By default, it renders text within it one font size smaller, such as from small to extra small, or X small. Span, a generic inline container for phrasing content, which does not inherently represent anything. It can be used to group elements for styling purposes, using the class or ID attributes, or because they share attribute values, such as lang. It should be used only when no other semantic element is appropriate. Span is very much like a div element, but div is a block-level element, whereas a span is an inline-level element. The docs are telling you that you should avoid using divs and spans for literally everything. Strong indicates that its contents have strong importance, seriousness, or urgency. Browsers typically render the contents in bold type. Sub specifies inline text which should be displayed as subscript for solely typographical reasons. Subscripts are typically rendered with a lowered baseline using smaller text. Sup specifies inline text which is to be displayed as superscript for solely typographical reasons. Superscripts are usually rendered with a raised baseline using smaller text. Time represents a specific period in time. It may include the date-time attribute to translate dates into machine-readable format, allowing for better search engine results or custom features such as reminders. U, the letter, represents a span of inline text which should be rendered in a way that indicates that it has a non-textual annotation. This is rendered by default as a simple, solid underline, but may be altered using CSS. Var, 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 represents the name of a variable in a mathematical expression or a programming context. It's typically presented using an italicized version of the current typeface, although that behavior is browser-dependent. WBR represents a word break opportunity, a position within the text where the browser may optionally break a line, though its line-breaking rules would not otherwise create a break at that location. HTML supports various multimedia resources such as images, audio, and video. Area defines an area inside an image map that has predefined clickable areas. An image map allows geometric areas on an image to be associated with hyperlink. Audio used to embed sound content in documents. It may contain one or more audio sources, represented using the source attribute or the source element. The browser will choose the most suitable one. It can also be the destination for streamed media, using a media stream. IMG, image, embeds an image into the document. Map. Used with area elements to define an image map, a clickable link area. Track. Used as a child of the media elements, audio and video. It lets you specify timed text tracks or time-based data, for example, to automatically handle subtitles. The tracks are formatted in WebVTT format, .vtt files, web video text tracks. Video. Embeds a media player which supports video playback into the document. You can also use video for audio content, but the audio element may provide a more appropriate user experience. Embedded content. In addition to regular multimedia content, HTML can include a variety of other content, even if it's not always easy to interact with. Embed. Embeds external content at the specified point in the document. This content is provided by an external application or other source of interactive content, such as a browser plugin. Iframe. Represents a nested browsing context embedding another HTML page into the current one. Object. Represents an external resource, which can be treated as an image, a nested browsing context, or a resource to be handled by a plugin. Picture. Contains 0 or more source elements and one image element to offer alternative versions of an image for different display device scenarios. Portal. Enables the embedding of another HTML page into the current one to enable smoother navigation into new pages. Source. Specifies multimedia resources for the picture, the audio element, or the video element. It is a void element, meaning that it has no content and does not have a closing tag. It is commonly used to offer the same media content in multiple file formats in order to provide compatibility with a broad range of browsers, given their differing support for image file formats and media file formats. SVG in MathML. You can embed SVG and MathML content directly into HTML documents using the SVG and Math elements. SVG. Container defining a new coordinate system and viewport. It is used as the outermost element of SVG documents, but it can also be used to embed an SVG fragment inside an SVG or HTML document. Math. The top-level element in MathML. Every valid MathML instance must be wrapped in it. In addition, you must not nest a second math element in another, but you can have an arbitrary number or other child elements in it. Scripting. To create dynamic content in web applications, HTML supports the use of scripting languages, most prominently JavaScript. Certain elements support this capability. Canvas. Container element to use with either the Canvas scripting API or the WebGL API to draw graphics and animations. NoScript. Defines a section of HTML to be inserted if a script type on the page is unsupported or if scripting is currently turned off in the browser. Script. Used to embed executable code or data. This is typically used to embed or refer to JavaScript code. The script element can also be used with other languages such as WebGL's GLSL, shader programming language, and JSON. Shader language. Global Language Shader Language, GLSL. Demarcating edits. These elements let you provide indications that specific parts of the text have been altered. Del. Represents a range of text that has been deleted from a document. This can be used when rendering track changes or source code diff information, for example. The ins element can be used for the opposite purpose, to indicate text that has been added to the document. Insert. Represents a range of text that has been added to a document. You can use the delete element to similarly represent a range of text that has been deleted from the document. Table content. The elements here are used to create and handle tabular data. Let's get tabular, you know what I mean? Get some tabs, some tables. Caption specifies the caption or title of a table. Column defines one or more columns in a column group represented by its implicit or explicit parent, call group element. The call element is only valid as a child of a call group element that has no span attribute defined. Call group defines a group of columns within a table. Table represents tabular data, that is, information presented in a two-dimensional table comprised of rows and columns of cells containing data. T-body encapsulates a set of table rows, TR elements, indicating that they comprise the body of a table's main data. TD a child of the TR element, it defines a cell of a table that contains data. T-foot encapsulates a set of table rows, TR elements, indicating that they comprise the foot of a table with information about the table's columns. This is usually a summary of the columns, e.g., a sum of the given numbers in a column. TH a child of the TR element, it defines a cell as the header of a group of table cells. Oh, table header, of course. The nature of this group can be explicitly defined by the scope and headers attributes. T-head encapsulates a set of table rows, TR elements, indicating that they comprise the head of a table with information about the table's columns. This is usually in the form of column headers, TH elements. TR table row defines a row of cells in a table. The row's cells can then be established using a mix of TD data cell and TH header cell elements. Forms HTML provides several elements that can be used together to create forms that the user can fill out and submit to the website or application. Further information about this available in the HTML Forms Guide. Button an interactive element activated by a user with a mouse, keyboard, finger, voice command, or other assistive technology. Once activated, it performs an action such as submitting a form or opening a dialog. Data list contains a set of option elements that represent the permissible or recommended options available to choose from within other controls. Field set used to group several controls as well as labels, label, within a web form. Form represents a document section containing interactive controls for submitting information. Input used to create interactive controls for web-based forms to accept data from the user. A wide variety of types of input data and control widgets are available. Depending on the device and user agent, the input element is one of the most powerful and complex in all of HTML due to the sheer number of combinations of input types and attributes. Label represents a caption for an item in a user interface. Legend represents a caption for the content of its parent, field set. Meter represents either a scalar value within a known range or a fractional value. Opt group creates a grouping of options within a select element. Option used to define an item contained in a select, an opt group, or a data list element. As such, option can represent menu items and pop-ups and other lists of items in an HTML document. Output container element into which a site or app can inject the results of a calculation or the outcome of a user action. Progress displays an indicator showing the completion progress of a task, typically displayed as a progress bar. Select represents a control that provides a menu of options. Text area represents a multi-line plain text editing control, useful when you want to allow users to enter a sizable amount of free-form text, for example, a comment on a review or feedback form. Boy howdy, we're getting towards the end here. We're almost done, man. Interactive elements. HTML offers a selection of elements that help to create interactive user interface objects. Details creates a disclosure widget in which information is visible only when the widget is toggled into an open state. A summary or a label must be provided using the summary element. Dialog represents a dialog box or other interactive component such as a dismissible alert, inspector, or subwindow. Summary specifies a summary, caption, or legend for a details element's disclosure box. Clicking the summary element toggles the state of the parent details element open and closed. Web Components. Web Components is an HTML-related technology that makes it possible to, essentially, create and use custom elements as if it were regular HTML. In addition, you can create custom versions of standard HTML elements. Slot. Part of the Web Components technology suite, this element is a placeholder inside a web component that you can fill with your own markup, which lets you create separate DOM trees and present them together. Template. A mechanism for holding HTML that is not to be rendered immediately when a page is loaded, but may be instantiated subsequently during runtime using JavaScript. Obsolete and deprecated elements. Warning: these are old HTML elements that are deprecated and should not be used. You should never use them in new projects, and you should replace them in old projects as soon as you can. They are listed here for completeness only. Notice how I read that strongly? This is probably wrapped in a strong. We could check. Okay. Strong called it. See, that's the kind of stuff that you'd know if you study this HTML element stuff. Acronym: big. Center: content. dir. Font: frame. Frameset: image, but fully spelled out. An ancient and poorly supported precursor to the IMG element. It should not be used. Literally ancient. Oh my goodness. Marquee. Ugh. I don't even want to know. Menu item. No break. Prevents the text and contains from automatically wrapping across multiple lines. This was maybe useful before phones. No embed. No frames. Param. Plain text. RB. Oh, it's another Ruby kind of related one. RTC. Another Ruby related one. Shadow. Strike. TT. XMP. Well, that was HTML elements. Thank you for watching. Amazing if you made it to the end. If you want to see more videos like this on other topics like CSS, JavaScript, React, and really any other documentation I can find and get my hands on, I will read it because I am learning this stuff myself. And this is a fun way to force myself to read every word of that documentation and then listen to it again when I'm editing and then listen to it again when I'm proofing. So I guess I don't have any more excuses to not know these HTML elements. Oh, well, you're probably going to still see mostly divs from me.